What sleeping NFC East receiver is about to make his presence known? Is one rookie signal caller already set to give you big numbers in 2023? And how concerning is another rookie's knee situation as far as his ADP goes in current fantasy pros and FFPC drafts? Plus, 10-time FFPC league champion Jared Eisenlohr is going to join us to talk about Allen Lazard in New York, Jahmyr Gibbs in Detroit, and more. We've got a great show for you. Farrell Elliott is here. Stick around. Your high-stakes fantasy football hour starts now.
Under pressure, I've seen greater men than need a lesson.
Broadcast live and heard around the world, you are now watching the most entertaining hour of radio on the planet. Welcome to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com with your hosts Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott. The High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour is your home for analysis from the best players in the world. And now, because no one else was available, here are Eric Balkman and Farrell Elliott.
Solace in the scripture, are we not all our father's sons? I became a man, nobody ever told me what a man was.
Thank you, Rob, and greetings and salutations to all you Bulkaholics and Farelliacs. Welcome to the latest episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by MyFFPC.com. I'm your slightly above average host, Eric Balkman. I'll bring in my co-host, the definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Farrell Elliott, shortly. Coming up on tonight's show, Michael Thomas's ADP. Too high, too low, or as Goldilocks would say, just right. The true stud in the Washington Commanders backfield. We're going to tell you who that is, or maybe there's multiple studs there that could be league winners. We'll get into that. And 10-time FFPC league champion Jared Eisenlohr will drop by to discuss Quentin Johnston's prospects in 2023. Jamison Williams, when is the right time to be looking for him in your FFPC and Fantasy Pros drafts, and much more. Now, if you want to connect with us on Twitter, you can do so at HSFF Hour, at Eric Balkman. Always learn more about Farrell's Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. You can post on our Facebook page at facebook.com/HSFF, or you can also email the show at highstakesfantasyfootball@gmail.com. If you have any questions for us, now is the time to send them. We'll try to get to all the chat room questions, all the tweets, and all the emails in the fantasy feedback segment coming on later in the show. Thanks to our audio engineer and my best friend, Bryce, and of course, our producer and mutual friend, Rob. Ladies and gentlemen, you can win $1 million in the Fantasy Pros Championship at just a $350 entry fee at myffpc.com. This is the inaugural Fantasy Pros Championship. Never offered $1 million at a $350 price point before until now. If you register by June 1st, which is another 13 days, and draft by June 15th, you're going to be able to get a free $35 FFPC league credit. If you do that up to 3 times, you'll get up to 3 credits as well. Register at myffpc.com for that. The Dynasty startups are going strong. We got a ton of them popping off tomorrow and Sunday, and a couple that are just this close to being filled, so we can get those drafts going off this weekend as well. That's at myffpc.com. You can play at the $100 level all the way up to the $5,000 level. As a reminder, the FFPC, we've been doing Dynasty fantasy football for darn near a decade. We have well over 1,300 leagues, yet not a single league has ever folded in the FFPC's history. Register for your Dynasty startups at myffpc.com. Also, time's running out if you want to get in on that early bird promotion with the 2023 FFPC main event. If you register by May 31st, 12 days to go on that, a little bit less than 12 days, given that we're going on the air at 10 o'clock tonight. You can register for that and get $100 off your first team. You'll get $300 off each additional team, as well as getting you registered for that FFPC Pros versus Joe's drawing, which will happen in the first week of June sometime. After everybody has taken advantage of that early bird promo, we're going to pick some names out of a hat, essentially, virtually or digitally, I guess, as it were. And there's going to be 42 Joes taking on 42 industry pros. If you've been following Darren Armani's Twitter feed over the last couple of weeks, you can see who a lot of the pros are that are going to be participating in this. And each of those 12-team leagues, there's going to be 7 of them. Whoever wins each one will get a free FFPC main event in 2024 and can compete for a $1 million grand prize. So make sure you are registering for the FFPC main event so you can get in that drawing. That's at myffpc.com. FFPC Best Ball Tournament and the Superflex Best Ball Tournament are off and running. $125 entry fee will get you in the running for a $200,000 grand prize in the best ball tournament. Just $35 will get you in the running for a $50,000 grand prize in the Superflex best ball tournament. Those you can both register for at myffpc.com. If you'd rather play in a closed 12-team league, totally up to you, and that's cool. myffpc.com is your home for that. If you got $5, you got an Abe Lincoln on you, we have a fantasy football draft for you. That's at myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on this airing tonight. Of course, share it and get notified on all future broadcasts so you never miss anytime the FFPC YouTube channel goes live. We do every Thursday night, we do every Friday night, and obviously as we get deeper into the summer, we're gonna have a lot more best ball coverage, live draft coverage. We've already done some of that so far this year with Genesis and Revelations. Obviously, Aiden LaCorey and Dave Terpoli did a FFPC best ball tournament live coverage. We're gonna get some Fantasy Pros live draft coverages, as well as maybe a main event or two. That is all coming up this summer on the FFPC YouTube channel, which you're watching right now, youtube.com/FFPC Fantasy. Let's bring him in right now. He's waited long enough, ladies and gentlemen. You check out his Kentucky Fantasy Football State Championship at KFFSC.com. The definitive commissioner of fantasy football, Mr. Farrell Elliott. Farrell, welcome in, man.
Hey, Balky, thank you. I'm coming in via my Android phone tonight as some connectivity issues with my laptop. Balky, I think you do such a wonderful job introducing the league every night, and you do it fresh, and you do it off the cuff, and you talk about our beloved Dave Terp, and now AD joining him.
Farrell was just giving me a great...
Oh, no, we froze up. Where'd you go? Oh, goodness, Balky. But you look good frozen, Balky. You got the beard, you got the hat, and you know, if you were going to be frozen in time, this is how I would want you to be, you know, to have this expression on your face. But what happened? I'm hitting stuff, and I don't know if you're there or not. It's just one of those kind of days for me. Hey, you're back.
That might have been. I think that was me. My fault. I apologize for that.
I kept talking and entertaining the folks. I was telling them, you know, that if you were not alive, a lovable person that you are, and if you were actually a fossil, we would want to discover you in this frozen state, because you had a beautiful expression on your face and your beard looked great. And I mean, it was really, really good. Now, since we're getting off on a convoluted start anyway, you know, since I am engaged with the microphone and the camera on my cellular device, I don't have access to my email screen. And so I kind of know what I want to talk about to our guest about tonight, but I don't remember questions 2 and 4. I have John Stone, and I wanted to ask him about Schultz, but I don't remember what number 2 and number 4 were. Can you refresh my memory?
Yeah, absolutely. So we're going to be talking with Jared Eisenlohr coming up in about 7 minutes or so. Farrell, you're going to ask him about whether FFPC players are going a little too hard after Garrett Wilson and not going hard enough.
That's
after Alan Lazard.
Yeah, and, Wilson and Lazard. Yeah.
Yep. And then the other one is we're going to talk about whether Quentin Johnston should be a guy that we look at.
I've got Johnston. Round. So what's question 6?
Oh, 6 is Dalton Schultz, which I think you already referenced.
Well, what is question 8 then? I'm missing one.
How many quarterbacks would you draft before Joe Burrow this season?
Oh, well, God, you know, that's a crazy question to begin with. Okay. All right. So, you know, let's go ahead and you got anything you want to talk about with me?
Yes, I do. We're going to bring up a few things here at the top of the show. And this is something I was very excited about, because last year I picked up Samaje Perine in a lot of my dynasty leagues, Farrell. I've kept him on a lot of my dynasty leagues, and I'm getting just more and more positive stuff about him in the role he's going to have for the Broncos, at least early on in the season. Nick Kosmider, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. My apologies to the Kosmider family. He covers the Broncos for the Athletic, I beg your pardon. He says that Perine's going to have a significant role in the offense. Now, Javonte Williams had that significant knee damage last fall that he is still recovering from. Perine had 782 yards on just under 200 touches in his rookie year with the foreskins, as you call them. But this is going to be his biggest backfield workload since then, according to Cosmiter. Quote, he should be a fixture in Denver's offense, regardless of Javonte Williams' health. That's interesting. And if we look at his new head coach, Sean Payton, he has had a history of slicing up that backfield amongst, 2, 3, sometimes 4 guys. During Payton's 15 seasons as the head coach of the Saints, the team's second leading rusher had more than 95 carries in 11 out of those 15 years. Quote from Payton, "We signed P. Ryan because we knew he was durable and reliable. We felt like we got another solid runner who's built in a strong way. There are a lot of things he does well. When we signed him, there was still uncertainty with Javonte Williams." So now the thing that we have to talk about here, Farrell, is how significant is Samaje Perine going to be this season? I'm of the opinion that when you look at Javonte Williams and how serious that knee injury was, I think we're hearing, sort of the right things about Williams. I'm of the opinion that this guy is not going to be ready at the start of the season. I don't know if he's going to be right all season long. And I think Perine, at worst, is going to work into a 1B in this backfield. Now, maybe this is rosy on my part. I'm looking at through my orange and blue colored glasses with Samaje Perine this season. But the dude is running back 31 going in the early 9th round of the FFPC best ball tournament. I think that's too low. I think he is a player in this backfield, and I'm very excited to draft him at that spot.
Okay, and I can get aboard with that, no matter what Williams' health is. Let's talk about Williams first real quick. Here's a player that we're going to need to look at in the preseason. That's what Williams is probably doing. He's probably saying, my knee's feeling good. I feel like I'm making progress. I want to get in a game. I want to really feel it in a game. And then, I want to feel it in a league game. And he'll get confidence. It'll build confidence as soon as he gets hit a few times and as soon as he carries the ball and makes those terrific cutbacks that he's good at. He'll be back. But there's plenty of carries in this backfield, and we've always liked Perine. We liked him when he was in Cincinnati. We think he was not used right in Cincinnati. I believe you and I agreed to that in previous shows, and neither did he, because he's left a team that many people could argue is Super Bowl bound. He left the team that he's been with for, is it maybe 4 years now? The guy is relatively young, 27 years old, and he's a 7-year veteran in the league. But his contract offers 2 years, $7.5 million were similar from each club. So he obviously feels that he has a role. He's followed the money and the opportunity, and the money was the same. So the opportunity is what he's looking for. And I think he's going to have an opportunity. And Balky, you didn't talk about catching the ball. On a team that loves to throw the ball in Cincinnati and has plenty of pass catchers that they can rely on, they also relied on Perine. 38 catches last year, 4 receiving touchdowns. I think in the red zone, he will take some of the pressure off all the Broncos in the red zone, and I think he gives a very big-bodied, hard-running target in the passing game. I think he'll block, big, physical, strong. This guy's durable and reliable. That's what the coach said. I like his MO. And Balky, he has the second best beard in football after you. So, I think you should draft him. You two are a match made in heaven, actually.
Yeah,
I
like
Balky, if you could pull up the depth chart of this team, because I can't, because I don't have my laptop working. If you could they've signed a number of backs. I think an XFL refugee, Jaquez Patrick, signed with them this past week. They've signed a number of backs to fill this big role. This is the best one, but they want that role filled. And, we all know there's only one Tyreek McAllister in that backfield. He's got the catch and goal row and the cutback row. So there's some big backs in it. It's just let's go Denver. They got a good defense. Maybe they can get something going offensively.
They also have in that backfield, they signed Tony Jones from Seattle, obviously in that backfield. You mentioned Jaquez Patrick, a guy after my own heart. Go Noles, Florida State. Tyler Beatty, a guy we talked a lot about last year with Baltimore. He's with Denver now. Damare Crockett, and Jaleel McLaughlin are both on this team. And, of course, the aforementioned legendary Tyreek McAllister, who is sure to make waves this year. We love Tyreek McAllister. All right. Michael Gallup, shifting conferences and positions, says he's, quote, very confident he can return to the player he was prior to tearing that ACL in about 18, probably about 16 months or so ago. This according to Pro Football Talk on NBCSports.com. Now, he did only miss 3 games last season, but 39 catches for 424 yards and 4 touchdowns on a career low 10.9 yards per reception. Woof. Now, Gallup did say that last year his knee did feel sore at times, but he feels springy again. He's 27 years old. He had an 1,100-yard season in 2019 and had 840 yards in 2020. Mike McCarthy has said that Michael Gallup is going to be featured more, but CeeDee Lamb is there. Obviously, Brandon Cooks is there as well. And McCarthy wants to institute an offense that is probably going to give his defense a little bit more of a chance to rest. That was part of the reason that Kellen Moore moved on from Dallas to Los Angeles. That could limit Gallup's upside as well. But Farrell, as we look at the FFPC Best Ball ADP, shout out to Darren Armani, FantasyMojo.com, at FantasyMojo on Twitter. This is where we get all our FFPC ADP that we quote on the show. Michael Gallup in that format, wide receiver 71 at the 1606. He's basically free right now. I like that, taking a guy like Gallup in the 16th round, because not only could he have a big season, but he looks like a spike week type guy, which is what you want as you're trying to win a 6-figure grand prize.
Are we talking this player for best ball?
Yes.
Are we talking
best ball?
For best ball, if you're stacking Cowboys, I can live with it. The problem with the best ball for this player and these spike weeks, he's got to play 2 games against the Eagles, the secondary. And, as far as I'm concerned, that's the best secondary in the game. He gets the Commanders twice. That took a first-round defensive back out of Mississippi State, and they played well in the secondary last year. Now, okay, so when he plays the Giants, you can expect a big game. There's things I would like to do differently in best ball at this point in time, after I've been able to evaluate some of the rookie receivers who could be playing better at the end of the year during the bye weeks, now that I know their landing spots. And there's good landing spots. You don't have to get the name guys that are going around 8, 9, and 10. You can do a little. There's some guys we can get to in these rounds too. So I think Gallup's best ball is behind him. But if people want to keep taking him in the 16th round, you can't argue with it, Balky.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those guys, like, especially as you said, Farrell, if you have CeeDee Lamb and you already have Dak Prescott, Gallup makes for a nice little stacking opportunity there, and it should be pretty cheap as well. I wanted to talk a little bit. We'll get to Jordan Addison. We'll get to Anthony Richardson, a couple of rookies that we've talked about already on the show. But before we get to that, I do want to bring on tonight's guest, who has been feasting in our green room right now, ladies and gentlemen. I'll bring him on right now. He's been attending FFPC. He's been attending live drafts out in Vegas for more than a half decade. Usually has between 5 and 7 FFPC main event teams every year, and usually another 10 to 12 at the Fantasy Pros level as well. For a period this past year, he was actually in the top 10 of the championship round of the FFPC main event. He did end up placing 3 main events, including a championship in one of them. He also recently won the NFFC Playoff Challenge. Nice chunk of change there, $75,000, which means his career winnings well into 6 figures. Lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and is a Detroit Lions season ticket holder, lifelong fantasy football enthusiast, and lifelong NFL enthusiast. I'm going to get into that in a little bit. I want to welcome him on right now, ladies and gentlemen. If you're not following him, make sure you're following him on Twitter at JaredE22. Please welcome in 10-time FFPC league champion, Jared Eisenlohr. Jared, welcome in. Did I get your last name pronunciation right?
You've been doing good, man. You've been doing good.
Good. Excellent.
Did you wear that Packers hat on purpose for me?
Okay, no, here's the thing. So I was going to tell Farrell about this. Jared, I live in Northeast Wisconsin, and yep. I've been a Packers fan, pretty much my whole life. Now, my 9-year-old son, had a class trip today, and part of the class trip was taking a tour of Lambeau Field. I've been up to Lambeau Field a zillion times, never actually taken the tour of it. And then so I was like, okay, well, I'll go up there for that. And then afterwards, I went to the pro shop, and to like my kid wanted something. So, and then I was just looking around, I'm like, man, this is a Mitchell and Ness hat, and it was on sale. I'm like, I'll be stupid not to get it. So if I wouldn't have just bought it today, I would not be wearing it tonight. But that's why I'm showing it off tonight. But good. Listen, man, I'm excited for the Lions this year. I think it's a great story. It's a great coach. It's a great coaching staff, and obviously that talent there is not only exciting for an NFL standpoint, but very exciting from a fantasy football standpoint. Yeah. Can you tell us before we get into the interview tonight? Yeah, you are heavily invested into watching NFL football and drafting fantasy football. Can you tell us a little bit about sort of the, I guess, written agreement that you have with your lovely and intelligent wife?
Yeah. Well, listen, I think like many people, football season, it leads to demands on our time. And I love my family to death, but when football comes around, it's difficult to balance everything. And so to avoid the weekly fights about when and where I'm watching football, or if I'm traveling to an away game or going to Detroit for the game, we sit down, actually pretty soon, shortly after the schedule comes out, and we kind of map out the year. And we say, which away games am I going to go to? I usually bring her to one in October for her birthday. Mm-hmm. And that way, when the football season comes, we're not arguing every week. We know where I'm going to be and who gets the tickets and where we're going and what days I'm going to be gone. And so it just makes for a little smoother season once we get to it. So we've been doing it now for 3-4 years, and we have a lot of fun with it. We post it to social media and let family look at it, and everybody gets a good kick out of it. Yeah.
You certainly have football life balance in working order. What well beyond what I have. I should probably adopt something like this with me and my wife as well. So she'll be watching this. She might be watching it right now for all I know. Jared, when you are not winning all these FFPC leagues, can you tell us what you're doing for a living in Grand Rapids?
Yeah. Well, right now I'm struggling through fantasy baseball. Just trying to trying to scratch the itch a little bit. It's never been latched on like football has, but I work in tech, so I run sales for a conversational AI and automation company. So when I'm not working or on the road, just enjoying time with my wife, my kids. I've got a 6 and a 3-year-old. I'm trying to play as much golf as I can, spend time out on the water, and then these days we're picking up a lot on the slow drafts with FFPC, and so me and a group of guys that I go to Vegas with. Every year for the live drafts, we've got the group text going, and we're getting into the slow drafts and starting to have fun with it. And from here, it's really kind of a slow build until full-on draft season and football season.
Good for you. Yeah. Farrell, do you have a question? We lose Farrell. We got Farrell back. I'm sorry. Or maybe we don't. I will ask this question, Jared.
Sure.
While we try to get Farrell back here. I want to get into the whole Aaron Rodgers New York Jets thing. When we look at and I'm going to reference this for the FFPC best ball tournament. Right now, Garrett Wilson is going off the board. It was wide receiver 10 at the 204, right? Now, you would think that Allen Lazard is going to be the number 2 wide receiver in that offense, yet he's going wide receiver 51 at the 11-10. He's basically going 9 rounds after Garrett Wilson. No quarrel for me that Wilson's the better receiver. But are people maybe being too aggressive in drafting Wilson and not being aggressive enough in drafting Allen Lazard?
Yeah, I mean, I think for sure, like having Lazard there is going to take away from Wilson. I think, like you said, Wilson is younger, certainly a far more talented wide receiver. He'll finish the season leading the Jets in just about every statistical category as long as he stays healthy. He's that good. But you are paying what I think is an unnecessary premium. When you look at Allen Lazard, he's got the obvious chemistry with Rodgers from their time in Green Bay. He's familiar with the system. So within Nathaniel Hackett's offense. And I can see him getting off to a really fast start because of that, where Garrett Wilson sort of gets his feet under him. They also paid him a lot of money to go there. I think it was at $11 million a year or something like that. So if the Jets offense is as good as people expect, there's going to be plenty to go around. And I would much rather get the value in the, say, 11th and 12th round with Lazard. I think you get a higher weekly floor as well. Than reaching, I don't want to say reaching, but paying that premium for Garrett Wilson at 17, 18, where he's been typically going from what I've seen.
I think, Lazard's an interesting guy too, because we don't we know, like,
Did we lose you, Blocky? Give you a minute.
Jared, I apologize. We're both having massive internet issues tonight. I don't know
Oh,
what.
good. I didn't know if I just
No,
took over the show on my own.
You're good. You're good. Let me ask you this. We talked about the Jets. Let's talk about the Green Bay Packers. Christian Watson is going as wide receiver 23 in the FFPC best ball tournament right now. 508. So basically the middle of the 5th round. Is he going to live up to that ADP this year, knowing that Aaron Rodgers is in New York and Jordan Love is going to be his quarterback?
Short answer is no. I don't think so. Now, full transparency, I have Christian Watson in a few of my best ball leagues so far. I think the highest I took him, however, was 5'11". I think he's crept down to like the 5'8", 5'7" range now. He started slow last year. He picked up steam as the season went on. I think he had 4 straight games with a touchdown, but nothing before that and nothing after that. So his production was really in a 4-game stretch. I do like him better in a best ball than I would in a season long. A couple of things scare me, though, I guess, a little bit about Watson. One is the obvious question marks at quarterback. We don't really know what Jordan Love is yet. There's not a lot of other proven weapons in the passing game to take attention away from him. And I see Green Bay, and maybe you can weigh in on this too, at least from your perspective of being a Packers fan, that I see Green Bay putting Love in very comfortable positions early on with the 2 running backs and not asking him to do a whole lot. I mean, he has a lot of weight on his shoulders. The Packers have gone from Favre to Rodgers to now we don't know what Jordan Love is. And so I think they're going to protect him a little bit. Now, for those reasons, I do like him. I don't know if I'm comfortable with him at 5'8" as he's going right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I was reading something the other day. I think it was from the Football Guys. They talked about the jump from that sophomore wide receivers can make from year 1 to year 2. And since 2014, rookie wide receivers who have had a minimum of 20 targets, on average, on their sophomore season, they get 22% more targets, 30% more receptions, 45% more yards, and 48% more fantasy points.
Wow.
So that would apply, obviously, to Christian Watson. It would apply to Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Drake London, Jahan Dotson, George Pickens, and a couple of the other ones as well. So I think that does bode well for him. I don't know if I'm ready to jump on him early to mid 5th round. I think late 5th round is where I would be more comfortable starting there.
Christian Watson going ahead of Jerry Jeudy, Terry McLaurin, Christian Kirk, Mike Williams, and Michael Pittman right now, going right behind DeAndre Hopkins and DJ Moore. I want to talk about, speaking of Mike Williams, I want to talk about a player that we've discussed on this show over the last couple of weeks from a dynasty perspective. I want to talk about Quentin Johnston tonight from a redraft perspective, like the FFPC best ball tournament, for example. Yep. He is going, I think at the 10:04 is his ADP over the last 7 days there. How often have you been taking Quentin Johnston knowing that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are still going to be in that wide receiver room this year?
Every time. Every time, as much as I can. I think the last draft I did, I was able to get him at 10-2 out of the 11th spot, and I was ecstatic. I especially like him in dynasty leagues this year as the future of Keenan Allen. Like, we don't really know, and I think with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, they cannot really stay healthy. And by default, I think he's likely going to be the number 2 wide receiver in most games for the Chargers. And the Chargers throw the ball 65% of the time, which is second most in the league. They have a very capable quarterback throwing him the ball. So for those reasons, like, I think I don't look at Quentin Johnston as a number 3 because I'm sort of counting on Mike Williams or Keenan Allen to stumble or have these nagging injuries that have plagued them for the last couple of years. And him playing most games is the number 2 in a very good offense.
Quentin Johnston right behind Brandon Cooks and Cortland Sutton in the FFPC best ball tournament. He's right ahead of Rashad Bateman, Michael Thomas, and Zay Flowers. Let's, speaking of Cortland Sutton, I've heard and read so many people steaming up Marvin Mims ever since the Broncos selected him in the NFL draft a few weeks back. I'm wondering if this is creating and maybe it's not, but I'm wondering your perspective. Is there a buying opportunity on Courtland Sutton now because Quentin Johns, or beg your pardon, because Marvin Mims is getting people so excited from a fantasy drafting standpoint. But what about Courtland Sutton? Because now he's plummeting. Is now the right time to be striking hot on Courtland Sutton? And I'll bring this up right now before I have you answer that, Jared. Courtland Sutton has an ADP of wide receiver 43 at the 907.
Yeah, Mims is intriguing. I think mostly because he can flat out fly, like he's fast. I'm not really getting on that train myself. He's fast. He's going to have a role, the Tyreek, Deshaun Jackson type. And I may be in the minority, but I'm expecting a fairly significant turnaround from the Broncos. Barring a trade, I can see Sutton playing a very key role as a possession receiver, particularly valuable in PPRs for Sean Payton. He's had success, Sean Payton, with these types of wide receivers from the time in New Orleans. So Sutton's 6'4", 220. Michael Thomas, pre-injury, 6'3", 220. Marquise Colston, 6'4", 220. Those guys both fared fairly well in this offense. And so I actually have Sutton in a deep dynasty league I've been in for a long time that has 53-man IDP rosters. And I've had a few offers for him this offseason. I'm just not really willing to let him go. So in redraft leagues, I'm loving value on him in the 10th round. It sounds like he's going a little bit before that now.
Yeah.
But in a similar spot to Lazard and the Jets, like I think Courtland Sutton is a very good value especially if you go running back, tight end, quarterback heavy early, and you need some good value picks on wide receiver. He will be on more than a few of my rosters this year for sure.
I think, and Sutton's the type of guy, like I have him on a couple of dynasty leagues. And if somebody would have given me like an early second round rookie pick prior to the rookie draft, even in a year when I'm not really excited about this draft so much, I probably would have parted ways with Sutton for that pick this year. I never got that offer. I'll ride it out this year and see what happens with Sean Payton. But I'm not terribly excited about him right now. And the Marvin Mims thing isn't doing me any favors, too.
A little scary. Yeah.
Very scary. Yeah. But I'm kind of with you. Like, so when you say that you think the Broncos offense bounces back, have you been investing in any? We talked about Samaje Perine at the start of the show. Have you been investing in any Broncos players this year, Jared?
Yeah, I think Sutton has been somebody I've invested in. I've also been in a lot of these best balls. The way depending on how I play the tight end position, like where it's falling to me and where I'm drafting and what players are falling. Greg Dulcich has been somebody that's ended up on the back half of the drafts as some tight end depth. I did reach a bit on a best ball with Javonte Williams going back in a draft I did in January, February. I'm hoping there's some production at least somewhere along the season, but I was able to make a play on him in the 6th, 7th round. Outside of that, I do have a couple of dynasties where I've got Russell Wilson still on the roster. So part of me is hoping that's going to be a rebound because of that. But I don't know that I'd be targeting Russell Wilson or any of those guys in a redraft right now.
Dalton Schultz has been kind of a polarizing guy. I was listening to the GOAT District podcast when they did their live coverage of the Genesis and Revelations drafts, or as they call it, Revelations and the minor leagues for the Genesis. But I know those guys are not big Dalton Schultz guys this year. He is moving to a worse offense from Dallas to Houston. However, the target share you would like to think is going to go up. Is he still in for a good 2023 this season? And I'll tell the viewers right now, too. Dalton Schultz in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament has an ADP of tight end 13 at the 903. Right behind, he's been surpassed by Dalton Kincaid. But Dalton, back-to-back Daltons. Wow, that is weird. Dalton Schultz at the 903, tight end 13. Seem like a good spot for him. What are you prognosticating for him this year, Jared?
Yeah, I'm struggling a little bit on Dalton Schultz. So I think the upside, one thing you didn't mention that I think will play to his advantage is favorable game scripts. I mean, I think they're. I don't see the Texans milking the clock to get a win many times this season. So, he could be a very good safety valve for what's likely going to be a rookie quarterback that's starting. There's not a lot of passing game weapons outside of Robert Woods. That said, it is a quarterback downgrade. Coming off some injuries, it does give me a little bit of fear. Maybe I shouldn't read too much into this, but no other team really made a big push for him in free agency.
Right.
And he ended up taking $2-3 million less on a 1-year deal than he was originally offered by the Cowboys. And so something just doesn't feel good there. Like, I think there's certainly a case to be made, especially in the tight end premium leagues. I think he's a solid tight end too. I think I'll have some shares of him because of that, but the majority of the leagues I play in are tight end premium. And so, we tend to sit there with 2-3 tight ends in them. I think that's what I see him as. I think last year he was being drafted as a clear-cut top 5 tight end 1, and I think he's definitely in the tight end 2, mid to high tight end 2 territory this year. Just a lot of question marks that I'm just not quite comfortable with yet.
Yeah, he's going Chiga, as far as tight ends go. Njoku, Okonkwo, and Kincaid are going right in front of him. He is comfortably ahead, I would say, about a round and a half plus ahead of Greg Dulcich, Cole Kmet, and Juwan Johnson. So that's what we're looking at as far as Dalton Schultz goes.
That tight end drop off is big. I mean,
it's huge.
It falls off a cliff after a while, and so in some cases, I think the ADP for Dalton Schultz might even be inflated because people are having to reach because that cliff is coming, and I think it's a bit inflated based on where his real value is.
In drafting your teams this year, but be it the best ball tournament, fantasy pros, whatever, what's sort of been your approach to tight ends, Jared? Are you trying to get one of like the top 3 or 4 and then see what happens after that, or have you been varying it up?
Yeah, it's been a mixed bag. It really kind of depends on where I'm drafting. It's nice to have one of those top 3 or 4. I'm not big on Kelsey necessarily this year, and we can get to more of that in some of my fades. But if you're in a position to grab one of those studs, and it's a late first round, early second, like it certainly can be justified. But I think there's enough value when you get down into the Hawkinsons, the Goddards, and things like that, where you don't necessarily need to jump, because when you build a roster around a tight end, it tends to really leave a lot of holes at the end. And I think it's something I've struggled with. I think I would say I like to have the tight end on my roster within the first 5 rounds. But it's very rare that I'm doing it in the first or second.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I know I was looking at some of Farrell's KFFSC league where I play a bunch of teams in there. I was looking at some of them after the draft, and I'm like, okay, this is it's okay for running backs, it's okay for receivers. This team doesn't look all that great. Well, then I realized I took Travis Kelce in the first round. I'm like, oh, okay, so that explains
exactly.
Sort of like why I'm not in love with my backs or receivers. Is because I invested in tight end early, which could work out. It might not, but I get what you're saying with that as far as the drop off goes, and as far as the dangers of drafting a tight end early. Speaking of tight ends, everybody has been and I was talking with Bradley Stalder, was on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with me last night on the Better Sports Network, and we're talking about rookie tight ends and how everybody's, especially from a dynasty perspective, we're all excited for Mayer and Kincaid and Laporta and Musgrave and Kraft and all Schoenmaker and all these other guys. But we tend to overlook some of the tight ends from last year, because last year was such a horrible tight end class. To this year, it's an awesome one. But what about Trey McBride? A guy that is now coming into his second year in the league, started to flash a little bit at the end of the 2022 season. We don't exactly know what's going on with the quarterback situation there because of Kyler Murray's injury. But Jared Eisenlohr, tight end 24, is Trey McBride right now at the 1408. I'm into him at that spot. If I'm trying to win a 6-figure grand prize, he is the type of guy that could not only have spike weeks, but really help you out for that low of an ADP.
Yeah, I'm with you. Very interesting player this year. Highly touted coming out of Colorado State. Fairly boring rookie year until the end. He came on strong, coincidentally, after Murray's injury. But probably because McCoy was tall enough to see over the line and hit him down the seam. But Tight ends
Well,
don't
is there
typically
something
start strong anyway.
Jared, let me bring this up. Is there something to be said for Kyler Murray throwing to Zach Ertz, most of the season, and then McCoy working with McBride, who was kind of a backup, right?
Yeah.
And then he was kind of zeroing in on that guy in practice, and then all of a sudden, hey, McBride's playing out there because Ertz is hurt. McCoy's out there because Murray's hurt, and there might be something to be said for that connection there, and really helped him along.
It's a great point. And that could be the case. I think the list of tight ends who have broken out in their second year is long. I mean, the obvious ones, Kittle, Hawkinson, come to mind right away. Like, they doubled their production across the board. And I think the most similar comp for Trey McBride from a statistical standpoint was Mike Gesicki. Gesicki's rookie stats were eerily similar to McBride's. In his sophomore season, it turned into 51 catches, 550 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I mean, you're not going to break the bank with that, but that's decent production. And I could see a similar stat line for McBride being the floor. And I think it's a very respectable tight end too. The quarterback play is going to be questionable. Hopkins' future in Arizona certainly is in doubt. There's likely another situation where you're going to have very favorable game scripts throughout the season in a pretty high-flying division, no less. And so I'm fairly high on Trey McBride. I'll have quite a few shares. He'll be well owned for my teams for sure.
Yeah, just going way too low. I mean, you look at some of the. I'll just list off a few of the tight ends that are going ahead of Trey McBride. You have Dawson Knox, who obviously he was neutered a little bit by Dalton Kincaid. Mike Gesicki is going ahead of him. Michael Mayer, Gerald Everett, Irv Smith, Juwan Johnson. I mean, all those guys are going ahead of Trey McBride, and some of them significantly further ahead. And you could get a guy like McBride late. That makes a lot of sense. We don't often talk quarterbacks on this show, Jared, but I'm going to ask you a quarterback question now, just to kind of get your feel on how well the wisdom of the crowd is dialed into this. According to the Fantasy Mojo ADP for the FFPC Best Ball Tournament over the last week, Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson are the top 4 quarterbacks off the board. And then it's Joe Burrow at quarterback 5 at the 403. When you're drafting quarterbacks, and maybe you can get into your philosophy of drafting quarterbacks when you only have to start one in a non-superflex league, your philosophy of drafting quarterbacks, and is Joe Burrow as the QB 5 correct?
I don't think so. I think I would draft Hurts and I'd draft Mahomes over Burrow. And I think that's the list. I think it goes to Burrow from there.
Just real quick. Let me interrupt you. Sure. Why is it Burrow ahead of Allen, and why is it Burrow ahead of Lamar Jackson for you?
Yeah, I think the philosophy in drafting quarterbacks has changed quite a bit as like the mobile quarterback is kind of, you're getting like half quarterback, half running back. And so the value of those, like a Jalen Hurts and then a Lamar Jackson, if you're comfortable with the style and the offense and the injury history, there's certainly a very, very high ceiling that you can have with those quarterbacks. I think when I look at Burrow, his weapons are returning. There's big question marks in the Cincinnati running game too. I mean, they've lost P. Ryan. There's questions around Joe Mixon. The offense is really going to live and die with Joe Burrow. I like the addition of Irv Smith as well at tight end. I think that's a nice addition for Cincinnati. And that he's about to get paid. I mean, I'm curious to see what this contract's going to be like when it comes to Joe Burrow. I would put him and Josh Allen very close. For me personally, I'm going to wait. You're having to pay a lot higher premium for Josh Allen. I'd rather wait a round or two and get a Joe Burrow, who I feel is going to be, from a consistency standpoint, just as solid as Josh Allen. That's my personal preference. From a quarterback standpoint, it's one that before the running quarterback who could put up 45 points a game on any given week, I was a big proponent of waiting, getting in that 6th, 7th, 8th, sometimes the 10th, 11th round for my quarterbacks. I think if you're not in a position to get one of those top 2 to 3, I'm waiting, because when you think about it and you start to peel it back, like when you get down into some of those mid-tier quarterbacks, the difference isn't that great. It just isn't. And so I have targeted Hurts a few times, and that's left me similar to what when you draft your tight ends early, you just feel like there's holes everywhere else. But you know what you're getting with Hurts. He's a solid week over week. His history is quite minor. He had a couple of hiccups last year. He's a tough guy, and he can throw and run. Like he can equally do both. And I think those are the kind of guys that I want who can put up those 40, 50 point games, but you're going to get 25. And that's important to me.
The offense should be elite again this year. Like there's just so much, that we talk about the Bengals offense. You look at this, Jamar Chase is going as wide receiver 2 right now at the 103 on average. T. Higgins, wide receiver 14 at the 306. I mean, obviously they still have Tyler Boyd there. The offensive line is improved. Mixon, we think is still going to be there. We'll find out. But if he's not, Chase Brown is going to be capable as well to handle a significant portion of the workload. And then you have, I already mentioned Higgins. So it's like all these weapons here. It's a great offense. Why not take Joe Burrow a little bit higher? Yeah. I think there's a lot to like about that.
You can't fault somebody on Josh Allen there either. I think personally, I would rather.
It's a personal opinion, personal preference.
I'd rather have Burrow in the 5th than Josh Allen in the 3rd.
Yep. Totally get it. I want to get to some listener emails, and Jared, I handpicked these tonight because we have hardly talked any Lions football yet. We're going to talk.
Oh, good. Nice. Football. I like it.
Rocky in Morristown, New Jersey. Who's the better value in the Detroit backfield, Jahmyr Gibbs or David Montgomery? Now, I will tell everybody this: as far as the value, or as far as the ADP goes for these players, Jahmyr Gibbs is going off the board as running back 12 at the 307. David Montgomery, running back 26 at the 612. I don't think you'd want both of these players on your best ball team, Jared, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm assuming that if you could only have one, is it Gibbs or is it Montgomery?
Yeah, I'd probably take Gibbs at the end of the 3rd. Is probably where I would go
because he's a potential league winner and just is the more explosive player. Okay,
yeah, and it kind of depends on the league you're in. Like when you're going for these best balls or you're going for these big tournaments, you can't just fall in line. You can't just say you can't take the conservative path. And I think what you're going to get with Montgomery. I think he could score a lot of touchdowns. I look at Jamal Williams last year. This is a great offensive line for the Lions, but you also get a lot more in the passing game. And I think Jared Goff has played admirably, but he's not known to go down the field a whole lot. So when you get a weapon like Jahmyr Gibbs coming out of the backfield, I think you get a lot of PPR opportunities there too. And so I would lend to say Jahmyr Gibbs rather in the 3rd would be my preference.
Let's go to the YouTube chat right now. Question from Easy Morning Rebel: what's it like being a co-manager with Matt Stoken? I believe I'm pronouncing it right. LOL. What can you tell us about Matt Stoken and being a co-manager with him, Jared?
Yeah, I've had to do that before. I think this is an inside joke. I think we've got some people watching, but I remember the first time I took Matt Stoken out to with our group out to Vegas and had a draft. It was his first FFPC draft, and we did it together. And I wanted another one to sit in on anyway. I think it was the COVID year, actually. I remember being at Caesar's Palace instead of Planet Hollywood.
Okay.
And Matt and I's friendship was tested quite a bit when he was going after Marlon Mack, I think in the 4th round. And I said, you can't do it. I'm not doing that. And I think Sammy Watkins was also in the mix there. And so I think there was some tense moments for us during that draft. And that was the first and the last time I ever agreed to co-own a team with
co-managed team. So the team did not fare well that season.
It was abysmal. It was abysmal. I'd be surprised if they won a game. I couldn't have my name attached to that. I just said, "You're on your own, man. You're on your own. I'm out."
Let's go to Don in Luverne, Minnesota. Hi, Jared. At what point in my Fantasy Pros draft should I start looking at Jamison Williams? Thanks. That is Don in Luverne, Minnesota. We've been using FFPC Best Ball ADP for the course of the program tonight. I will bring this up for Fantasy Pros for Don here. Jameson Williams, Jared, wide receiver 48 at the 9-12. Should he be looking at Jameson Williams earlier than the late 9th round? Your thoughts on Williams?
No, I not earlier. I think there's a point where you say, hey, let's take a shot. But even before his suspension, I'm as big a Lions fan as there is on this earth. And I don't get the vibes. I don't like the vibes I'm getting on what's going on with him this year. He wasn't particularly impressive when he came back from his injury at the end of the year last year. A couple of big drops, body language. And there's some hints from Holmes and Campbell even that they're just not thrilled with his work ethic right now. I think the suspension only serves as another strike against him. And I think he's on a pretty thin line. I don't have any insider information to say that. I just kind of what I'm reading and following this team so closely. So there's no one I hope I'm more wrong on than Jameson Williams, because he would be a dynamic addition to our offense. I'm just candidly not touching him in redraft best ball dynasty this year unless he were to completely fall into the back quarter of the draft. It's not something. I'm happy to be wrong. I'm just not. It's not on my team.
Jared, if you can't tell, with technical difficulties are preventing Farrell from rejoining us tonight. So it is just you and me the rest of the way.
Good.
I figured you'd be cool
good
with
to
this.
See you. Last time I saw you, you didn't even have a beard. Like it's been,
no.
Like,
Well, the next time you see me, I probably will not have a beard. And that'd be my guess. There's a non-zero chance of anything, but we'll see what happens. I want to get into a couple of things I wanted to get to in the first segment of the show tonight. We didn't get a chance to because Farrell and I were blabbing too much. But I want to talk Jordan Addison here. He is now under contract with the Minnesota Vikings. Obviously, he was awesome at Pitt as a freshman in college. 1,593 yards, 17 touchdowns in 2021 with Kenny Pickett throwing to him. Then he gets Caleb Williams throwing to him last year. Caleb Williams, who won the Heisman Trophy last year. His numbers took a hit. My question to you, and this is a guy I've kind of, for better or worse, stayed away from in my rookie drafts, because I just don't know what the upside is when he's playing opposite Justin Jefferson. I know there's a couple of different ways to look at it.
Yep.
You can look at it like, oh, Jefferson's all the coverage is gonna roll to him, and Addison's gonna have the single coverage and he's gonna be able to destroy who's ever covering him. I'm looking at more to the standpoint like the Vikings aren't stupid. They're gonna pepper Justin Jefferson as much as they possibly can, and Addison will not get a high target volume. I am more on that side than anything else. Your thoughts on Jordan Addison as wide receiver 39 at the 802 in Fantasy Pros drafts?
Well, you got Hawkinson too.
And Hawkinson, that's a great point.
Yeah, you got Hawkinson too. And so there's a lot of mouths to feed there. I tend to be more in the camp that you're in, and there's not a chance. Justin Jefferson is just not somebody that really can be stopped. I mean, if he could be easily stopped, they would have stopped him already. And so unless you're going to be rolling three people over to him, two hasn't really been enough. Surprisingly, the team that did do a good job with it last year were my Lions. And I think it was week 2, and it was an anomaly because he had 2 catches for 20 yards or something like that, and we were the worst defense in the league. So I think Justin Jefferson is really hard to go against. Now, KJ Osborne did a good job in that role last year too when Thielen was hurt. But even when Thielen came through, it kind of depends on where Jordan Addison's going to slot in. I mean, if he's going to play that Thielen role, and I think you've got a lot of crosses over the middle, you've got a lot of shorter passes that he can be sort of the underneath guy. So I'd be curious to see how they use him. But I do think your floor is pretty high with Jordan Addison. I think it's going to be some, at least some consistent production. But I don't see him as what you called with Jahmyr Gibbs, like a potential league winner. I just don't see that with him.
Right.
That's my opinion.
That's a great point, and I think it's a great point because I agree with it. It sounds like
sure.
We're in our own echo chamber here,
that's
agreeing
good.
with each other. The thing is, like when you're, and I don't want to, you've drafted a ton of these best ball drafts too, Jared, where you're trying to find these guys that can really give you these spike weeks that can outperform their ADP. Yep. And I don't necessarily see it. And I'll give you the FFPC best ball ADP right now for Jordan Addison. I think there's better ways to spend a draft pick in the mid-8th round, which is where he's going. Jordan Addison, wide receiver 39. Look no further than guy right above him in James Cook, a guy that, yeah, maybe he's nothing in Buffalo this year. Maybe he's huge. You never know. Kadarius Toney going 2 spots ahead of Jordan Addison. I could definitely see Kadarius Toney getting a top 10 wide receiver season, much more so than Jordan Addison. So these are, that's the thing. It's like you want to look for these guys with the spike weeks and the high ceiling. And I think there's better ways to utilize, at least for a best ball tournament, better ways to utilize a mid-8th round pick. Okay. One other thing I wanted to get to before you tell us targets and fades here. The Kokomo Tribune's George Bremer, who has been out watching Colts practice, said that the coaches for Indianapolis have been pretty impressed by Anthony Richardson's pocket awareness. Quote, Richardson's not quite as raw as he's sometimes been portrayed. He showed off some of his high-level playmaking ability even during the brief rookie minicamp. Now, legendary upsides Pat Kerrane said that last year his sack rate for Quentin Richardson, Jesus, I'm losing it. That's like basketball 25 years ago. For Anthony Richardson, his sack rate under pressure was lower than any quarterback dating all the way back to 2015. Now, they're in shorts. They're not wearing pads. Obviously, it is fluff piece season. That said, he's wide receiver 12 in the FFPC best ball tournament right now. We think he's going to start week 1. And this is a guy that, you look back to where this guy was being talked about in February. He's a project. He's not going to be ready. Not so fast, my friend. It seems like he is ready. He is going to be playing. And this is a guy that has, speaking of legendary upside, a guy who never tested or a guy who no one has tested as good as him at the NFL Combine. The upside is huge here. Your thoughts on investing into Anthony Richardson this year in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament at the 8-11 as quarterback 12, Jarrett?
Yeah, I didn't really watch him play much at Florida. The first time I saw him was when he was at the Combine. It was amazing at the size of this guy. Like he's in his athleticism, like it's incredible. I think I have a bit of bias on situations like this because I go back to one of the live drafts I did in Vegas. I remember sitting there I drafted in the 2 spot, and so we're coming back in probably the 10th round, and I was at 10-11, and I was going to pick again at 11-2. And there was a quarterback there that I said he'll fall to me at 11-2. His name was Patrick Mahomes, and he was getting ready to start for the first time.
Right.
And I said, he'll fall back to me. And he didn't. And I watched Pat Mahomes that whole year just tear up the league. And I think that would have been a very profitable year for me if I could have gotten Pat Mahomes. And so part of me is that FOMO of somebody like Anthony Richardson. The only thing that scares me when I look at it, though, is just the weaponry. Pittman, it's a running back heavy offense. It's a decent offensive line. When you look at the coach there now, is it Shane Steichen?
Yep.
From Philly.
Yes.
If he deploys him like he did Jalen Hurts, he could be a dangerous man. I don't have him right now as a QB1 anywhere. I've got him as a backup in that. I think more than the 9th and the 10th. Maybe it was the 8th. I can't remember. But he could be a league winner. It's very rare that a rookie quarterback turns into that, but he's one of those guys. Like it's got Cam Newton in his prime written all over it. He's big. He can run. If he can throw and he's got the pocket awareness, which one of the listeners here is saying that they're talking about.
Yeah,
I could see myself trying to make sure I've got a healthy stock in Richardson.
What's interesting too is like, and I fall in this trap too. Like, oh God, I don't want to invest a pick that he is going to be my starting quarterback because he's being drafted as a starting quarterback right now. But like I could if I decided to do that, get Richardson at the end of the 8th round. It's not like he has to be my only quarterback. I mean, Smith, Aaron Rodgers, Wilson, Goff, Tunga Bailoa, Daniel Jones. I mean, Jordan Love, Derek Carr, all those guys are going below him. So like you could pair him up And if it doesn't work out for him, then at least you have these other quarterbacks that you could go with. So I think there is, and that helps accentuate the upside, because if he is big, you have that cushion in case he's not big, and it's going to be unbeful if he does come.
Yeah, and I think that's the best practice for any rookie quarterback. You just don't know, until you get punched in the mouth or taken to the ground, like how what these quarterbacks are. And so if you're going to go on one of those high upside guys, like somebody like a Derek Carr, it's a great person to kind of pair him with, because you at least have a capable quarterback with good weapons that can carry you, especially in a best ball.
I want to get because we're wrapping up things right now, and I have not, and Farrell normally asks this question, but I'm going to ask it tonight. A player that you are fading early in drafts, I believe we'll get into Travis Kelce here a little bit, as well as a player that maybe you've targeted, and it doesn't have to be targeted early in the round. In the early rounds, it could be a mid or a late round player, but a player that you're trying to target and get on as many teams as you can.
Yeah, as far as starting with the fades, I said it last year, and I live to regret it. I can't really go back on it now, and so I'm just going to kind of stay with the same guy. I think Travis Kelce, he's going to be 34 during the season, and his age has to catch up to him. And I'd rather get out too early than get out too late. I guess kind of where I'm at with him. I still see him getting drafted in the first round, and I'm just not there. I'll be surprised if I end up with anything of Travis Kelce this year, just based on where he's getting drafted. And I may come back and regret that again next year, because he goes for 80, 1,200 and 10 touchdowns again.
Right. Yeah.
As far as people I'm targeting, I think early on, thinking third, fourth, I'm all in on J.K. Dobbins. I think, assuming he stays healthy and all signs point to he will be, the Ravens' new offense historically has shown that they utilize running backs out of the backfield. I'm trying to get him in the third round wherever I can. Other obvious targets for me are Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think I see him going at the turn, the 1-2 turn a little bit right now. I think that's probably a little too high for me. Even as a Lions fan, I'd like to see him maybe mid-second. He's just not falling there much anymore, but he's somebody I would love to have shares on, and I do have him in some dynasty leagues. And when I look a little later in the draft, I am high on both Mike Gesicki and Juju Smith-Schuster, probably more so than a lot of people, just relative to their ADPs, mind you. Bill O'Brien coming back to the Patriots, a mildly competent offensive coordinator. You don't have Matt Patricia running the show. Right. And previously when he was there was a lot of success with other tight ends and slot receivers like Gronk and Welker and Edelman. I'm not expecting them to be the MVPs of the league, but I think if you're looking for some mid-late round guys, I think there's some good floors with some decent upside potential with Juju and Mike Gesicki. And if I'm looking at the last half too, Rashid Shaheed, especially in the best balls, I think he's kind of a sneaky sleeper for me. I'm a little worried about Derek Carr's ability to throw the deep ball. He was actually, I think I was looking and saw he was 10% less accurate than Andy Dalton was on the deep ball last year, but he can flat out fly, and Carr over Dalton is an upgrade overall. And I think he can be particularly valuable in the best ball format. He's a threat to score a deep one every week.
A guy who is a threat to score a 7-figure grand prize this year in the Fantasy Pros Championship, as well as the FFPC main event. You follow him on Twitter at JaredE22. I lied. This will be my last question. Who wins the NFC North this year, and how far into the playoffs do the Detroit Lions get, Jared?
Yeah. The Lions will win the North. We're going to have the first playoff game in the history of Ford Field this year. We're going to win our first playoff game since 1992.
Here we go.
I'm not going to say we're going to go to the Super Bowl, but I do think we take a couple of big steps. I think we win the division. We host a playoff game, and I think we win a playoff game this year.
Good on you. That's going to be exciting for the NFL.
The goal is to get to a point where that's not something that we're like super enthusiastic. Like that's
Right.
not the end goal, but I think for
Right.
this year, the step we need to take, I think we have to get that under our belt.
It's going to be a fun season for
It
the
is
Lions.
111 days away.
If only we could get and like we had them on Hard Knocks last year. Boy,
Yeah.
it would be so entertaining if we get them on Hard Knocks again. They were
I
like
would-
Dan
I would
Campbell is
love
like
it.
made for that show.
I'd love it.
We'll
Yeah.
find out what happens. I know it won't be the Lions, but it'll be somebody else. But it could be Jared Eisenlohr winning $1 million in the Fantasy
Let's
Pro
hope so.
Championship or the
Yeah.
FFPC main event. Follow him on Twitter at JaredE22. Jared, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight, talking
bet,
a little
man.
fantasy football. Appreciate it. Be good. We'll talk with you again soon, man.
Good to see you, man. All right.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Thanks, Jared. Jared Eisenlohr, ladies and gentlemen, the 10-time FFPC league winner in the Fantasy Pros, the Mid Stakes, the FFPC main event, and of course, Dynasty Leagues as well. Jared E22 on Twitter. I want to thank him, Farrell Elliott, the FFPC, Rob Bryce, and of course, each and every one of you for hanging out and watching tonight. We will be back next Friday at 10/9 Central with 9-time FFPC league winner Frank Shinnick. He will be popping aboard to talk about his early drafts, sort of the lay of the land, what is standing out to him in drafts this year, and much more. A guy who's been playing, God, I think this is probably his 10th year playing high-stakes fantasy football, so he will have a lot of wisdom to share. In case you missed last night's high-stakes fantasy football show on the Better Sports Network, you can go back and watch it on the FFPC YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter channels. It was yours truly and Best Bell Fantasies, Bradley Stalder, chopping it up. 2 full hours of nothing but fantasy goodness. Great stuff there from Bradley. Really appreciated him popping on next Thursday at 7/6 Central on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, which you can watch on all the FFPC social media channels and bettersports.com. Dynasty League Football's Ryan McDowell will co-host with me for 2 hours. That's going to be a lot of fun for anybody who's, trying to figure out what happened in their rookie draft, what to do after the rookie draft, the steps you need to take to building a dynasty juggernaut from now until the start of the season. Ryan McDowell will be here to answer all your questions. Register by June 1st in the Fantasy Pros Championship as you try to win $1 million. If you do that and draft before June 15th, you get a free FFPC league credit into your account for $35. You can get that up to 3 times. That's well over $100 worth of free FFPC teams. You can win $1 million in the FFPC main event. Make sure you are registering by the end of the month so you can get in. Not only can you save $100 off your first team, but you will also be entered into the FFPC Pros versus Joe's drawing that will happen sometime, I believe, the weekend after the early bird. So like June 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, sometime around there, we'll have the drawing and we'll announce who the Joes are right here live on these airwaves on a special Wednesday night show that week. I got to check my calendar here. We will announce them on Wednesday. No. Yeah, I think Wednesday. Is it? I think it's June 7th we're doing that. No, June 9th. June 9th we'll announce it. Jesus. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm all discombobulated tonight, but I think June 9th. Don't quote me on that, but I think we'll reveal them on this show on June 9th, who the Joes are going to be participating in, trying to not dethrone because the Joes are the champs right now, but to take out these pros en route to winning a free FFPC main event entry for 2024. So myffpc.com is where to register for the main event so you get entered into that drawing. You can also win $200,000 in the FFPC Best Ball Tournament, just $125 to join there. Get a lot of good info from Jared Eisenlohr tonight on what players you should be targeting and fading and that to try to win $200,000. And if you want to play in the Superflex Best Ball Tournament, it's only $35 to join. You can win $50,000 grand prize. That's at myffpc.com. Plenty of dynasty leagues are going off tomorrow. Make sure you're registering for those. They start at $100. They go all the way up to $5,000 if you want to play fantasy football year round. That is the place to go, myffpc.com. And of course, the Fantasy Pros tournament, Fantasy Pros Championship, beg your pardon. I am commissioning the midnight draft tonight, which Dizzle told me is already filled, but there is a 12:30 a.m. draft. If you want to jump in that, I'll be commissioning that as well. So feel free to register at myffpc.com. We'll hang out, and you can try to win $1 million tonight. Nothing wrong with that. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on this video, and share it. Get notified anytime we go live on the FFPC YouTube channel, which will be Thursday at 7/6 Central with myself and Ryan McDowell on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show. I appreciate each and every one of you for watching tonight. Thanks so much. Or even if you're downloading this, streaming it later, I appreciate that as well. Your weekend officially starts now.
This has been another episode of the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour presented by myffpc.com. It was broadcast live and was watched around the world. Balky and Farrell will be back next week with more analysis, more interviews, and more advice from guests much smarter than they are. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk with you again next week.
Say this too. I was telling this earlier in the show. I was at Lambeau Field today, and it was my second time I got to go on field level. I was at field level for a Packers-Seahawks playoff game, I think about 4 years ago, and they say don't touch the grass. What was the first thing I did during that playoff game? Touch the edge of the grass. Got yelled at by the Packers security. And the Packers tour guide that we had today told all the kids, all the parents, whatever you do, do not touch the grass. We don't want you touching the grass. No less than a dozen people went out and touched the grass. That's just the way we behave in Northeast Wisconsin. That was kind of funny. Also, ironically enough, when I was at Lambeau Field, they had the NFL Network on, and I happened to see that Jim Brown passed away today at 87 years old, a guy that we just don't have enough time to talk about the impact that he's had on the NFL, social activism, and of course, what he did in Hollywood as an actor. Was in a ton of great movies. Any Given Sunday, Dirty Dozen, the list goes on and on. But a guy who is truly one of the greats, one of the pioneers for the players in the NFL, one of the pioneers for a lot of stuff, sociologically speaking, too, and as far as how our culture has evolved today from when it was when he was at the peak of his powers, playing in the NFL, just a short 9-year career. I think Barry Sanders quit after 9 years, retired. But yeah, Jim Brown will be missed. Really sad news to see him go today. So I definitely wanted to give a shout out to him, HSFF or FFPC, all the FFPC players, the community, thoughts and prayers with the Brown family. RIP Jim Brown, and we will see you again soon. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. Certainly appreciate it. We'll be back on Thursday for the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, and of course Friday for the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour.